Oh, good morning. Flint's News Talk 1470 WFNT. Boy, we tried to set this up a few months ago, and it's finally happened. On the heels of a special blog post at Flint Water Study by Scott C. Smith with some lessons he learned in Flint and clarifying the facts. I've got Dr. Edwards with me and Scott Smith. Thanks for joining, gentlemen.
Good to be here.
Scott, can you hear us?
Good to be here.
Beautiful. So this is... I imagine this is shocking for some people. You guys had some differences of opinion regarding testing in Flint.
Yeah, we sure did.
Well, go ahead, Mark.
Go ahead, Scott.
Go ahead.
So go ahead, Dr. Edwards.
Yeah, and, it was what happened was unfortunate. There was some scientific misinformation that got out, and we had some discussions about resolving it unsuccessfully, and that led to public confrontation. And after about a year and a half, Scott approached us a few weeks ago and said he wanted to set the record straight. So, Scott, go ahead.
And I'll give you the intro to the blog post, and it's extensive. There's a lot up here. You're going to want to go and read this. But Flint Water Study will support anyone who is intellectually honest and wants to be part of the solution to problems. A few weeks ago, we were approached by Mr. Scott C. Smith, with whom we've obviously had some disagreements over the years. After a series of frank discussions, we agreed to share his hard-earned experience and insights about citizen science. We're also providing him with a public forum to set the record straight about certain aspects of his work. Scott Smith, thanks for coming and being with us.
Yeah, it's great to be here, and I'd like to start with a couple minutes here. And this is, first of all, no one can put themselves in the place of the affected Flint residents and what they've done. And this is the right thing to do to continue to help Flint and bring people together. And, there will be more Flints, though, and these are very, very important lessons learned for in the future. If you take, whether it's innovative new testing or working or thinking outside the box, if you can combine that with proper science and get input of industry experts like Dr. Edwards, and that is accurate. That's the way you can affect change and truly get help to the people that need it. And I also want to acknowledge the local UA 370 Plumbers Union, Harold Harrington and Ben Ranger. I am fully accountable for all the mistakes. That's why I did this. And there's a lot of misinformation out there. It needs to be corrected. But Harold and Ben have, for the last year and a half, been all over me to make the phone call and to reach out to Dr. Edwards and correct things and clarify. And I really like to thank the two of them because the last 2 years hasn't been easy. But in the trend, Harold is a resident of Flint, in the trenches.
Yep, we've talked to him here.
These individuals have been first class, and they have stood behind me when it's been very, very difficult. And I just want to thank them and to add that proper context.
So I appreciate that. And, yeah, we've had Harold Harrington on, and I know that he's been involved and done incredible work. I mean, it's important to have somebody that works with pipes, and he's helped you, I know, in testing and so forth. There were some differences in terms of, I remember one of the blog posts from Water Study just with respect to the testing site. So if you compare the levels of chlorine or the DPMs, but you're testing from a location that's not called for in the EPA guidelines, then you can't say that the parts per billion are too high or whatever the measure is. So that was one of the things that needed to be clarified, correct?
Correct, and that's what I like about, being able to have a professional dialogue with Dr. Edwards, and he can, now when I'm on a radio show with him, if I'm wrong, he can absolutely jump in and correct me, but it's my, the regulations that exist are, based on the cold water and and sink water, and we never represented that we were operating under the lead and copper rule. Yes, I should have been clearer on what we're doing, and I now know how to do that after working with the EPA. But I think it's important, just quickly, in the context of this, on March 14th, 2016, a well-renowned doctor and water engineer and expert, Bob Bocock, were on the Steve Harvey show, where they, and this is in the blog post, unequivocally stated it was unsafe to bathe in the water. And Harold Harrington after that was on, in a few weeks, reached out to me. Harold Harrington's wife was hospitalized with severe low blood pressure, flu-like symptoms, and Harold himself had a notice on the door saying it's safe to bathe and shower. And the way I looked at this as a non-scientist and my other experiences, like, how can you declare this water safe without testing it, specifically in Harold's house? And Harold has low blood pressure. So what I did at the time is I went to the scientific authorities I knew at the time, but they weren't experienced in subject matter experts like Dr. Edwards in water. So I did not go into Flint. I was actually, working with Harold, and then the plumbers, we started thinking, well, maybe we should check the water as it enters a home in the water heater. And there's some great, I want to keep this short, but some of the things that Harold and I worked on, we saw in residents' homes, we saw lead at or near the meter improved and go from like 200 parts per billion to 90. We actually saw improvement in the water, even though what we were doing was not part of any regulations. But it did actually help calm some people and get the information out. So
and it's fine to test from those sources, but if the EPA measurement is based on testing at the faucet, then the readings that you get from the drain on the water heater don't they don't apply to that standard, the EPA standard. That's the main point, right?
That's correct, and this is covered extensively in the blog.
And it is. You go into great detail. There's lots of links and there's lots of information. This is up at the flintwaterstudy.org, and this is a great resource. I mean, you get Dr. Edwards. You guys do a tremendous job updating this and providing all sorts of information up there.
Well, and to Dr. Edwards, real credit here, and him, and I really appreciate him being willing to, because it hasn't been easy for anybody involved. And he sat down and just listened to the facts, and there were things he wasn't aware of, there were things I wasn't aware of, and there's no reason everybody shouldn't be working together in a professional, respectful way, and learning from this, because citizen science is important, like I said, and. Citizen science, I believe, going forward, you got to be working with, the proper scientific authorities if you truly want change.
Yeah, because that's the model. This is how, it was citizens who said the water's not right. They were told over and over again the water's fine, and there were people who didn't buy it, and it was a result of them and Leanne Walters and Miguel del Toro bringing Dr. Edwards in, and then you're able to apply the expertise of someone like Dr. Edwards and say, he says, MDEQ and EPA, these guys aren't doing their job. They're not telling people that there's a problem with this water. And it's the same sort of thing that you were trying to do as well. You go at it in a different approach because you get a different experience. And so, but that's important, and it is important to work together, and it's important to have the people in Flint involved in doing this. But unfortunately, there's been some mistakes made as a result of this as well, and that's what your post is about.
Correct, and I think we live in a day and age where I don't know we're in this new world, and people need to talk to each other, and starting with me, talk to each other before doing posts, and try to work with each other, because it was pretty easy to clarify this, and I really regret not having this conversation with Dr. Edwards directly 2 years ago, and I know I've been talking on it. I'd like to, see if Dr. Edwards has any comments, or if I've said anything wrong, he can correct me on the radio right now.
Mark, what say you?
No, Scott's right on. I myself made mistakes that were very similar early in my career. That was very embarrassing. Thankfully, it wasn't a federal emergency situation, but, I did learn from that, and I never, ever, ever repeated it. And so I think a lot of this is just, hard-earned experience that I wasn't even taught as a PhD science person.
Well, you work you work in a different field. And I think you purposely work in a different field. It's with the type of engineering that you do, this impacts the public, and you do that because you think science should be used for good. This information is vital for people. If you're gonna be making policy based on science, it needs to be done correctly.
Right, and I think the mistake that I made very, very early in my career came from the same well-intentioned place that Scott's did, and that was, it's very, very hard when you're working with an affected resident, and they really, really believe something. They believe
Yeah.
that the water is making them sick. And to have to tell them that the science doesn't support that or the science is uncertain, it's very, very disappointing. It's very, very easy to want to tell them that their inclination is correct when the science just doesn't support it.
Yeah.
Or you present data in a way that they kind of grab onto it and kind of inappropriately, make conclusions. This is human nature.
Yeah.
And so, I having made that mistake myself, I'm all too willing to forgive Scott, and I really appreciate his courage and putting down these lessons learned, because this is a new frontier of science working with the public, and I think what Scott went through and what I went through early in my career, we'd be better for it if those lessons were disseminated.
Scott, you talk in the post about some of the things that you've gone through. There's been a reaction to your to your reaching out to Dr. Edwards as well. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, there's, I haven't seen, there's a flurry of activity, so I haven't seen all the reactions. But I would tell you that I'm working in a lot of places throughout the country, and obviously I am not a potable water expert scientist by any means whatsoever, but I do think out of the box, and I am an inventor, and I think there's been a lot of positive reaction to the people I have talked to, because there's a model here going forward where there may be, cheap, cost-effective, but proper testing within regulations, and then for research purposes that can be done with trained plumbers and pipe fitters.
Yeah.
And then I know, in the benefit of this is, and I like the people that are listening that are maybe are shocked by this, but I will now have a better ability, because I know I can go to Dr. Edwards, and if I find something that's wrong and it gets vetted properly, he will be the first one to call people out and help raise awareness to help people that can't help themselves.
Yeah.
And I think that is very clear, and I just respectfully ask everybody to understand that context, because I think there's a new model coming out of this for citizen science. And the only way we can get change is having proper scientific authorities help us when we find something.
Yeah. Let me. One of the things that I wanted to talk to you about too, and you talk about this in your post up at flintwaterstudy.org, is you were testing, and you worked with the EPA as well. So you were here, you were vested, you were spending time here and testing and working with citizens, and so you were working with Marc Durno at the EPA, correct?
That is correct. I was on the ground with Mark. We did some side-by-side testing. Well, first of all, I can't. There are three, for whatever reason, karma or whatever, Marc Durno, Marc Edwards, and Mark Ruffalo. So I guess I better use full names.
Full names.
Marc Durno.
There you go.
I can't,
Yeah.
So yes, Marc Durno, and, I'd like to really give him credit along with Harold and Ben. He was willing to sit down, and he acknowledged that my research with the plumbers and the residents outside of regulations was valuable in the EPA test, but it's got to. But and then he taught me how to talk about this and introduce it in residents that is proper. You absolutely never did I ever intend to cause panic or fear. And for those people that I caused panic or fear, I deeply apologize and trying to plan, but I will say I spent 12 weekends, missed a daughter's birthday, which I didn't mind doing. This is a passion. And I was in the showers and the baths and homes. Do I believe something was going on? Yes. But I can't, unless I can get it properly scientifically vetted and proven, we can't do anything. I do not think people were making things up.
Well, let me ask you
more research and data.
Let me ask you about this. When it comes to that last statement, one of the things that, and this was posted at Flint Water Study as well. There was a residence home you were testing with Harold Harrington, and you found lead sinkers in the faucet in the bathtub. If I'm saying that correctly, is that correct?
That is correct, and I was collaborating. I was, paying for the testing out of my pocket, and Harold and Ben volunteered to go do it. And within minutes, I wasn't there. I was out of state, and where I live in Massachusetts, and within 3 minutes of them calling me, they sent me a video. I called emailed MDEQ and EPA, you have to report something. There's no explanation for why lead sinkers would. But again, I'm not going to make false allegations, and all I can speak to is that I know Harold, Ben, and none of us, three of us, Harold, Ben, nor I, were involved in any way, shape, or form. We don't know how they got there. They shouldn't be there. But that you have no choice but to do the right thing in those conditions, even though people may get mad.
Were people mad? Were people mad at you for reporting that to the EPA and the MDEQ?
Yeah, Harold Harrington, we're mad, and I know, again, there's no way I can put myself in the shoes and experience what the Flint residents, and I've heard Dr. Edwards talk about the loss of trust. Yeah. But I can say I've gone with an affected family to visit MDEQ and talk to them, and I will say, the people I have dealt with want to do the right thing. They want to help, and I know there's been some theories out there that MDEQ put those sinkers up there. I see no evidence of that, and in my meetings, I just don't see that.
Well, I talked to people, and I heard the suggestions that this was done to discredit the resident, and beyond that, I mean, if someone did that to discredit somebody, you're stepping over the felony to focus on the misdemeanor, because that's an assault. This is a criminal matter. If somebody put lead sinkers in somebody's faucet, that's a criminal matter, isn't it?
Right. You'd be screaming it from the top of your lungs. And by the way, the timeline doesn't make any sense. The lead level skyrocketed before MDEQ even got to the house to investigate why. So the whole story is pretty ludicrous.
So, I mean, and that doesn't help any. We don't know what happened. It wasn't investigated. I don't know that it was ever reported to the authorities, which I would think that it should have been.
But Dan, I can step in. It absolutely was reported to the authorities. I got calls
from the police.
Harold Harrington preserved the lead sinkers. No, I think it's another division of the state of Michigan. I don't know. I defer to Harold.
Okay.
He kept those sinkers secure at the Union Hall.
Sure.
They came, met with him, and collected it. And I've received a few phone calls. I don't remember what agency.
Okay.
And just answered. And it's again, all Harold, Ben, and I know is we found them. We don't know how they got
there. And
there.
did the right thing and reported them, which, I think, and they acknowledged that fact at Flint Water Study. But it's a serious matter, and obviously they should get to the bottom of what happened there. So, but in any event, listen, one of the other things that you focused on, Mr. Smith, was, and I think that this is right. People call them nonprofits, but you suggest that a better term might be tax exempt. There are a lot of people here in Flint. There are a lot of people who are affected. There are a lot of people who are trying to do good things and help people out. And but there are, there's competing interests, and you're concerned about some of the folks who are working here, nonprofits, lawyers, and this sort of thing, and they're people that you've talked with and dealt with.
Yeah. Now, again, nonprofits, tax exempt. Most of them do great work, but I think, and this is and Mark Ruffalo taught me, sometimes you have to make people feel uncomfortable to get change. And I totally respect Mark Ruffalo. And we've got to make the environmental movement, all of us involved, have to be a little bit uncomfortable and maybe need to dig a little bit deeper, because some of these competing interests, I mean, if lawyers walk away in class action suits with the bulk of the money, and that's ultimately getting paid by taxpayers, how does that really help the Flint residents?
Right.
And I mean that with all due respect. These are discussions we need to have as adults, respectful. And when you've got, and I saw some other nonprofits, tax exempt in other cities, try to use, what was going on between me and Flint Water Study against me. And that doesn't, and that's what I say, my experience, Water Defense, absolutely great people, ethical, great to work with, never ever wanted anything from anybody but to provide community after community. Yeah. So what I'm talking about is other tax exempt organizations, and who?
Like who?
Well, I'm not prepared to name names in this because I really want this to be about Flint, but at a later date I will. I mean, I have specific references in Chicago and other ones, and there's a lot of people in the media involved in nonprofits, and that after going through this personal scrutiny when they're and being accused of all these things, And I, not having a conflict of interest and full disclosure, I think some of these other organizations, tax exempt, I think people like you in the media ought to pull their Form 990s. If you start looking at some of the public thinks nonprofits are all do-gooders, and most are, and they're not in it for the money.
Yeah.
But when you start, if you pull the Form 990s on tax-exempt organizations, and you start comparing them to the corporations that get attacked by the very nonprofits, you're going to see the executives and the staffers. They're making millions of dollars, $500,000 a year, and that's all well and good.
Yeah.
And I'm not casting aspersions, but I'm saying after the scrutiny I went through, I want to have this difficult conversation with the public.
You're a for-profit business. You started out as someone who was working on these things, and kind of by accident got involved in this because you experienced some flooding. But you had a proprietary technology, and then there were some filters, but those was for profit, and I know there was some concerns about that. You addressed this in your blog post as well. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, in no way, shape, or form before Flint, after Flint, did I ever make any representations that the technology I have could be used for potable water, whole home filtration, or any of that. And it should have been clearer. It wasn't, and there was a lot of misinformation out there. So, and when it comes to potable water, what I've learned as a non-scientist, certified water engineer, that it's very complicated, and and that's a whole separate show and discussion on filters from what I learned. And what I try to develop, and learning from my own disaster, is a way to test, because water and contamination aren't always necessarily in equilibrium, a way to have time exposure. And the main point is that it's not well known, but the EPA knows, Dr. Edwards knows. I took, for every, quote, water bug or sponge test I did, I took a grab sample. And, the EPA and the state of Michigan has looked at that, and outside of regulation, it's a starting point. It's data designed to be helpful to understand questions that may not be able to be answered scientifically quite yet.
Okay. Well, listen, gentlemen, I really appreciate your time. Dr. Edwards, any final thoughts from you?
No.
Okay. And I appreciate both of you for coming on and caring and being involved. And the Flint Water Study, a tremendous resource. Do go and read the Lessons Learned from Flint, Clarifying the Facts, post by Scott C. Smith up at Flint Water Study right now, flintwaterstudy.org. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Great to talk to you.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right.